The morning light filtered through the office windows as Marcus sat at his desk reviewing yet another email criticism from his boss. His hands trembled slightly as he read the harsh words, and his first instinct was what it always had been: to apologize, to explain, to somehow convince someone else that he was worthy of basic respect. For 37 years, this had been his default response to conflict, and for 37 years, it had failed him. Marcus was not alone in his struggle. Across offices, homes, schools, and relationships, millions of people experienced the same phenomenon. They recognized that certain individuals in their lives, what we might call toxic people, seemed to sense their vulnerability, like sharks detect blood in the water. These toxic individuals don't respect Marcus because his vulnerability itself is not the problem. The problem is that Marcus demonstrates daily through his actions, his words, and his very presence that he doesn't respect himself. When you don't respect yourself, you're essentially sending out a broadcast to the world, particularly to those with predatory tendencies, that you are available to be disrespected. The relationship between self-respect and how others treat us is not merely psychological theory or motivational speak. It operates on a fundamental level of human interaction. Toxic people, whether they realize it consciously or not, are attracted to individuals who demonstrate low self-esteem, like experienced predators are attracted to the weakest member of the herd. They don't consciously think, "I will seek out someone who doesn't respect themselves so I can abuse them." Rather, they instinctively recognize the signs and respond in kind. The person who apologizes for things that aren't their fault, who changes their boundaries to accommodate others' comfort, who prioritizes everyone else's needs above their own, this person is broadcasting weakness. Consider the example of Robert, who worked in the same corporate environment as Marcus. Robert had experienced similar treatment from the same boss, but something changed in Robert's response. When the boss sent a critical email, Robert didn't immediately panic or draft an apology. Instead, Robert took time to assess the situation objectively. Was the criticism valid? If yes, Robert addressed it methodically without excessive self-flagellation. If no, Robert calmly stated his position and moved forward. The remarkable thing that happened next was that the boss's tone, not immediately, but noticeably, the boss began to show Robert a different kind of respect. The respect one professional shows another. The difference between Marcus and Robert was not that Robert had thicker skin or was naturally more confident. The difference was that Robert had begun the process of destroying his weak self, the version of himself that depended entirely on others' approval for his sense of worth. This destruction of weakness is not about becoming cold, cruel, or disconnected from others. Rather, it's about dismantling the internal infrastructure that makes you available to be exploited. The weak self that must be destroyed is not your sensitivity, your capacity for kindness, or your desire to help others. Those are valuable human qualities. The weak self that must be destroyed is the part of you that believes your worth is determined by external validation. It's the part of you that apologizes when you haven't done anything wrong. It's the part of you that shrinks yourself to make others comfortable. It's the part of you that tolerates disrespect because you fear the alternative more than you fear the current situation. When you begin to understand this distinction, you start to see how toxic people operate. They are constantly testing boundaries, looking for the point at which you will finally push back. If that point never comes, if you never establish that there is a line they cannot cross, they will continue to encroach. They are not necessarily conscious villains in this process. Many toxic people are simply individuals who have learned that they can get what they want from people who don't defend themselves. They will continue this behavior because it works until it stops working. The transformation begins with a single powerful move: the internal decision to no longer be available for disrespect. This is not aggressive. This is not about winning a competition or proving superiority. This is about establishing a new baseline for how you will allow yourself to be treated. It's about understanding that respecting yourself is not arrogance. It's a prerequisite for having genuine relationships with others. Part 2. The powerful move. The inner shift that changes everything. The transformation in Marcus didn't happen overnight, but it did happen in a moment. The moment occurred on a Tuesday afternoon when Marcus received another critical email from his boss. Instead of his usual panicked response, Marcus experienced a sudden shift in perspective. He realized that he had spent decades seeking approval from people who had no business being the arbiters of his worth. He understood, perhaps for the first time with real clarity, that staying in a state of perpetual apology was not a path to being respected. It was a path to being increasingly disrespected. The powerful move then is this. You must decide internally and absolutely that you will not negotiate your basic dignity. This is different from being rigid or defensive. This is about establishing a clear understanding within yourself that there is a line, and beyond that line you will not go. You will not beg for respect. You will not perform excessive explanations for your worth. You will not accept treatment that contradicts the value you have decided you possess. This decision manifests in tangible ways. When the boss sent the next critical email, Marcus responded differently. He read it carefully. He assessed whether there was legitimate feedback he could use to improve. He acknowledged the valid points. But he also, for the first time, gently but firmly pushed back on the unfair characterizations. I disagree with this assessment, he wrote, and here's why. He didn't do this aggressively or with anger. He did it matter-of-factly, the way a professional might discuss a business disagreement with an equal. Something remarkable happened. The boss's subsequent email was different. Not friendly necessarily, but different. The edge of contempt was gone. Why? Because Marcus had demonstrated that he was not infinitely available to absorb disrespect. He had shown, through his actions, that he respected himself. This is the paradox that many people never discover. The more you demand respect from yourself, the more naturally others will offer it to you. The internal shift that makes this work has several components. First is the recognition that other people's opinions of you, while potentially useful information, are not determinative of your worth. If someone whose judgment you trust gives you feedback, that feedback might be valuable. But if someone gives you feedback from a place of hostility, manipulation, or their own insecurity, that feedback says far more about them than it says about you. The toxic person who criticizes you harshly is often revealing their own fragility, their own need to diminish others to feel powerful. Second is the understanding that setting boundaries is an act of respect, not disrespect. When you tell someone, "No, I will not accept being spoken to that way," you are not being unkind. You are being clear. Clarity is actually one of the greatest gifts you can give to another person, because it tells them exactly what the rules of engagement are. If you are unclear about your boundaries, you invite transgression. If you are clear, you prevent it. Third is the realization that people generally respect strength. This is an evolutionary truth. In nature, predators do not attack the strong and dangerous prey. They attack the weak and vulnerable. The same dynamic operates in human relationships. Toxic people will test and prod and criticize those they perceive as weak. But when they encounter someone who has established clear boundaries and who doesn't need their approval, something shifts. They either begin to treat that person with respect, or they move on to easier targets. The powerful move also involves a shift in how you speak about yourself. For years, Marcus would describe himself in apologetic terms. He would say things like, "I'm not great at public speaking," or "I'm pretty bad at organizing my time." He would preface statements with, "I might be wrong, but," or "This might be stupid, but." These verbal diminishments were constant reminders to himself and others that he was not fully accepting of his own existence. When Marcus began to change this, he didn't swing to the other extreme of arrogance. He didn't start claiming abilities he didn't have or taking credit for work he hadn't done. Rather, he began to speak about himself with neutral acceptance. "I'm still developing my public speaking skills," instead of "I'm not great at public speaking." "I'm working on better time management," instead of "I'm pretty bad at organizing my time." These seem like small changes, but they represent a fundamental shift in self-relationship. They indicate to yourself and to others that you are a person who is in process, who is capable of growth, but who does not currently hate yourself for not being perfect. The powerful move extends into how you spend your time and energy. For years, Marcus would drop everything to accommodate other people's needs. His coworker would call him with a problem, and Marcus would immediately stop his work to help. His family would make demands, and Marcus would rearrange his life to meet them. He was not setting these boundaries out of kindness. He was doing it from a place of fear. He feared that if he didn't accommodate everyone, they would leave him and he would be alone. The shift involves recognizing that your time and energy are finite resources. You cannot give them away indiscriminately without diminishing yourself. When you begin to protect your resources, something interesting happens. The people who truly value you will adjust. They will learn to bring genuine needs to you, not just every passing whim. The people who are exploiting you will disappear, which is actually a relief even if it feels scary at first. This leads to a crucial insight about toxic people. Their disrespect of you is often enabled by your acceptance of disrespect. If you stop accepting it, they have two choices. They can change their behavior, or they can leave. Some will choose to change. They will recognize that you are no longer available to absorb their toxicity and will adjust accordingly. Others will leave, seeking someone else who is more willing to be mistreated. This is not a loss. This is a solution. The powerful move is also visible in how you respond to manipulation. Toxic people are often sophisticated manipulators. They might use guilt. After all I've done for you, you won't help me with this one small thing. They might use threats. If you don't do what I want, I'll make sure everyone knows about your mistake. They might use false victimhood. Everyone's always against me, and you're the only one I can trust, so you have to support me, even if it's wrong. When you make the internal decision to respect yourself, you become immune to these manipulations. You can recognize them for what they are, attempts to control you. You can respond with clarity. I understand you're frustrated, but I'm not going to do that. You don't need to convince the other person that your boundary is reasonable. You simply need to maintain it. This lack of justification, this simple stating of your boundary, is actually what proves to the other person that you mean it. If you start explaining and defending your position, you're inviting debate. Your job is not to win the debate. Your job is to maintain your boundary. There is a phenomenon that occurs when you first begin to establish this new way of being. The toxic people in your life will often escalate their attempts to pull you back into the old pattern. They will increase their criticism, their emotional outbursts, their attempts to make you feel guilty. This is actually a good sign. It means your boundary is working. They are testing to see if you will break. If you do break, you have taught them that your boundary is not real. If you hold firm, you teach them that you have genuinely changed. Marcus experienced this intensely. His boss, sensing that Marcus was no longer automatically accepting disrespect, seemed to increase the intensity of his criticism. Marcus almost broke, almost fell back into the habit of over-apologizing and over-explaining. But he didn't. He reminded himself that this escalation was actually the sign that his boundary was working. He held firm. Within a few weeks, the boss's behavior began to shift. The respect that Marcus had demanded of himself began to be reflected in how others treated him. Part 3. The transformation that radiates outward, creating a new reality. 6 months after Marcus made the powerful move, his life had transformed in ways he never would have predicted. The transformation was not dramatic in the sense of sudden, explosive change. Rather, it was the accumulation of small shifts in how he showed up in the world and how the world responded to him. The man who had once apologized for his very existence had become someone people seemed to naturally listen to, respect, and want to be around. What Marcus discovered, and what countless others have discovered before him, is that when you stop tolerating disrespect from yourself, a cascade of changes begins. Other people pick up on this shift at a level that goes beyond conscious observation. Your body language changes. Your tone of voice changes. Your facial expressions change. You carry yourself differently. These external changes are not manipulation or performance. They are the natural expression of an internal shift in self-regard. The toxic people in Marcus's life responded in two ways. Some, like his boss, began to treat him with genuine respect once they realized he was no longer available to be treated as a doormat. The boss still had his difficult personality, but his criticism became constructive rather than destructive. He had learned that Marcus would listen to legitimate feedback, but would not accept disrespect. This actually improved their working relationship because there was now clarity about what was acceptable. Others, however, found Marcus less useful. A friend who had been in the habit of calling Marcus whenever she needed emotional support but never inquiring about his well-being, noticed that Marcus was now setting boundaries about when and how often they could talk. When Marcus suggested that the friendship should involve mutual support rather than one-way emotional dumping, this person became offended and gradually distanced herself. Marcus found that he grieved this less than he expected. He realized that he had been grieving the loss of this friendship every day of the friendship itself, because the relationship had been so fundamentally unbalanced. The powerful move, Marcus came to understand, is not primarily about changing other people. It's about changing yourself in such a way that you become less attractive to toxic people and more attractive to healthy people. It's about tuning your frequency. When you stop broadcasting vulnerability and desperation for approval, the kind of people who prey on those qualities look elsewhere. Meanwhile, people who respect strength and clarity begin to gravitate toward you. One of the most unexpected effects of Marcus's transformation was that his capacity for genuine kindness actually increased. This seemed paradoxical. He would have expected that setting boundaries and demanding self-respect would make him harder, colder, more selfish. Instead, the opposite happened. When he was no longer giving from a place of fear and obligation, his giving became genuine. When he helped someone now, it was because he genuinely wanted to help, not because he feared abandonment if he didn't. This made his kindness more meaningful and more appreciated. He began to help his co-worker James with a project, not because James was in crisis and Marcus felt obligated, but because Marcus genuinely believed in the project and wanted to contribute to it. James noticed the difference. He said, "I really appreciate you helping me with this, Marcus. It means something that you chose to invest your time here." This simple acknowledgement revealed something Marcus hadn't fully understood before. When people receive help that comes from obligation, they feel the obligation in it. When people receive help that comes from genuine generosity, they feel that too. And they value genuine generosity far more. Marcus also noticed changes in how he made decisions. Before the shift, his decisions were made with one eye always on what other people would think. He would consider a career move but reject it because he was afraid his boss would be upset. He would think about pursuing a hobby but talk himself out of it because he was worried someone would judge him. He would consider speaking up in meetings but remain silent because he feared saying something wrong. Now, his decisions still considered other people's perspectives, but in a different way. He would consider whether a career move made sense for his life, whether it aligned with his values, whether he had the capacity for it. Other people's opinions were data, not destiny. If several people he respected had concerns about a decision, that was worth listening to. If someone had concerns based on their own insecurity or need to control him, that was worth noting but not necessarily following. The most profound change, however, was in Marcus's relationship with himself. For decades he had been at war with himself. He was constantly criticizing himself for not being good enough, not being likable enough. This internal war made him exhausted and fragile. He was like someone constantly defending a fortress from imaginary invaders. Even when no one was attacking him externally, he was attacking himself internally. When he made the decision to respect himself, he essentially called a truce in this internal war, decided to treat himself with the same basic dignity and kindness he would offer to someone else he cared about. This didn't mean he became complacent or stopped working on self-improvement. It meant he approached self-improvement from a place of love rather than a place of self-hatred. "I want to work on this because I respect myself and want to be my best self" is a completely different energy than "I have to fix this because I'm broken." When you operate from self-respect rather than self-rejection, you become far less vulnerable to the manipulations of toxic people. A toxic person might try to trigger your shame, to make you feel like you're fundamentally flawed. But if you've already accepted your flaws, if you understand that everyone has flaws and that this doesn't negate your worth, their manipulation loses its power. You can look at your mistake and think, "Yes, I made a mistake. I'm still a worthy person. I'll learn from this," instead of spiraling into shame and desperation to prove your worth. 6 months into his transformation, Marcus found himself in a situation that would have previously destroyed him. A project he had led failed significantly. In the old days, he would have spent weeks apologizing, explaining, trying to make everyone understand that it wasn't entirely his fault. He would have spiraled into self-blame and desperately sought reassurance that he was still okay. Instead, Marcus took responsibility for the mistakes he had made. He learned from them. He offered to lead the post-mortem analysis. He proposed solutions for how to prevent similar failures in the future. He accepted feedback, but he did not internalize the failure as a definition of his worth. His boss, watching Marcus handle this with such maturity and responsibility, actually began to look for more significant projects to give him. Marcus's ability to fail without collapsing had made him more, not less, valuable. The principle that emerges from Marcus's story is this: toxic people need something from you. They need you to validate their perception of themselves by accepting their disrespect. They need you to be smaller so they can feel bigger. They need you to be available so they can have someone to hurt. If you become unavailable for these things, they lose interest. They move on. But if you refuse to become unavailable, if you continue to enable their toxicity by accepting it, they will continue to exploit you. The man who destroys his weak self cannot be destroyed by others because he no longer has anything others can destroy. He has already dismantled the internal infrastructure of neediness, of desperate seeking for approval, of fear of abandonment. These are the things that toxic people weaponize. When you remove these weapons from their arsenal, they become powerless. This doesn't mean Marcus became invulnerable to hurt. He could still feel pain when someone was cruel to him. The difference was that the pain was now clean, not complicated by shame or a sense that he deserved it. He could think, that person treated me poorly. That says something about them, not about me. He could feel the hurt and move on, rather than turning it inward and letting it fester. Over the following months, Marcus noticed that the quality of his relationships had fundamentally changed. He had fewer relationships, but the relationships he had were genuine. The people in his life were there because they actually valued him, not because they had learned that he would tolerate disrespect. He had more time because he was no longer spending enormous amounts of energy managing other people's emotions and expectations. He had more peace because he had stopped fighting himself. Perhaps most surprisingly, some of the toxic people in his life actually changed. His boss eventually came to Marcus privately and said something that would have been unimaginable before. "I've noticed that you seem different. You don't seem as stressed and you're doing better work. I'm sorry if I've been too harsh with you in the past." This was not a complete transformation of the boss into a kind person, but it was a recognition that Marcus had changed the terms of engagement. The powerful move, therefore, is not actually an external move at all. It's not something you do to someone else or for someone else. It's something you do entirely within yourself. It's the decision to treat yourself with respect. It's the commitment to no longer be available to absorb disrespect. It's the understanding that your worth is not determined by external validation. This is not a selfish move, despite what some people might claim. It's actually the opposite. When you establish healthy respect for yourself, you become capable of genuine, balanced relationships. You can give without resentment because you're giving from abundance rather than from obligation. You can receive help without shame because you understand that interdependence is human. You can tell people no without guilt because you understand that protecting your resources allows you to be your best self. The question that remains is this: are you willing to destroy your weak self? Are you willing to stop apologizing for your existence? Are you willing to set boundaries even when it makes people uncomfortable? Are you willing to demand respect from yourself and let that demand ripple outward into how you move through the world? These are not easy questions. Many people spend their entire lives avoiding them because the alternative to actually respect yourself requires letting go of some very old patterns. It requires tolerating the discomfort of people being upset when you set boundaries. It requires facing the fear that if you stop people-pleasing, everyone will leave you. But this fear is rarely based on reality. In fact, the opposite is true. When you stop tolerating disrespect, the people worth having in your life will draw closer. The people who are only there because you were useful will drift away. This is not a loss. It's a rearrangement. You're clearing space for relationships that are actually reciprocal and nourishing. Marcus's journey, then, was not really about other people respecting him. It was about him respecting himself. The respect from others followed naturally, as it always does. Toxic people, who depend on finding people who don't respect themselves, found Marcus much less interesting. Healthy people who appreciate strength and clarity began to notice him more. His boss treated him with more respect. His co-workers listened to him more. His friends who remained actually valued him. The man who destroys his weak self, the desperate, needy, constantly seeking approval version, cannot be destroyed by others because he has already taken responsibility for his own integrity. He has decided that his worth is not negotiable. He has established that his boundaries are real and consistent. He has committed to treating himself with the same respect he would treat someone else he valued. This is the powerful move. Not a grand gesture, but a small, quiet, internal decision that changes everything.